You're in the Navy? Let me guess. Your main job is posing for recruitment posters and filing paperwork in an air-conditioned office. Bradley, my husband's cousin and a newly promoted Army lieutenant, smirked as the entire table went silent. He leaned back, proud of his insult, clearly expecting me to get embarrassed. But before I could respond, a sharp clink echoed through the dining room. Grandpa Thomas had placed his fork on his plate. The warmth disappeared from his face. He slowly looked at Bradley and said, "Son, you'd better be very careful what you say next." Bradley's smile vanished. "My name is Emily Carter, and I'm a lieutenant in the United States Navy. Years of service had taught me that real strength doesn't need to be announced. It shows through discipline, skill, and calm under pressure." That evening, our family had gathered at Grandpa Thomas's home in Virginia for our annual dinner. Grandpa was a retired combat veteran. He rarely spoke during family gatherings, but whenever he did, everyone listened. My husband, Mark, sat beside me, quietly holding my hand beneath the table. He knew how much my service meant to me. Then Bradley arrived. He was a young Army lieutenant who treated every family dinner like a military ceremony in his honor. He spent most of the evening bragging about his training, assignments, and field exercises. He talked as if every routine exercise had been a historic battle. Everyone politely listened. I simply ate my dinner and stayed quiet. Then Bradley looked directly at me. "So, Emily," he said with a mocking smile, "still playing sailor?" A few relatives exchanged uncomfortable looks. Bradley continued, "I never understood why anyone joins the Navy. The real work happens on the ground. I bet you spend your days answering emails, drinking coffee, and sitting in an air-conditioned office." Mark immediately stiffened. Bradley laughed. "Come on, Emily. While guys like me are training in the mud for real combat, you're basically getting paid for ocean cruises." The room became completely silent. Mark started to stand, but I gently touched his arm and shook my head. Bradley thought my silence meant he had won. He was wrong. A moment later, Grandpa Thomas placed his fork on the plate. Everyone turned toward him. His expression had completely changed. "Bradley," he said calmly, "you'd better be very careful what you say next." Bradley swallowed. "Grandpa, I was only joking. It's just a little Army-Navy rivalry." "A joke?" Grandpa asked. His voice was quiet, but every word carried weight. "You're sitting at my table wearing the rank of a junior officer, yet you've shown no military bearing at all." Bradley looked down. Grandpa leaned forward. "What gives you the right to insult another officer's service? Do you even understand what leadership means? Do you know what it means to carry responsibility when other people depend on you?" Bradley opened his mouth. I just meant." "Quiet," Grandpa said. Bradley immediately stopped. Grandpa looked around the table before turning back to him. "It's time you learned what real service looks like." Bradley's confidence was gone. And judging by the looks on everyone's faces, Grandpa was about to reveal something about Emily's service that Bradley never expected. Grandpa Thomas never raised his voice, but the authority in his tone was enough to silence the entire room. "Stand up, Bradley." Bradley swallowed and slowly got to his feet. "Sir. Go to my study. On the mantel you'll find a wooden display box and a blue folder. Bring them here. Now." Bradley quickly walked down the hall. A few minutes later he returned carrying both items. His hands were slightly shaking as he placed them on the table. Grandpa opened the wooden box. Inside were several military decorations, including naval aviation insignia, mission patches, commendations, and a Purple Heart. Bradley's eyes widened. "Grandpa, these are incredible," he said nervously. "I had no idea you had such a distinguished combat history." Grandpa stared at him. "They aren't mine." Bradley froze. "They belong to Emily." Everyone turned toward me. Grandpa opened the blue folder and pulled out an official Department of the Navy citation. He slid it across the table. "Read it." Bradley looked down. Within seconds, the confidence disappeared from his face. Grandpa spoke quietly. "While you were bragging about routine training exercises, Lieutenant Emily Carter was serving as a tactical mission commander during a dangerous maritime operation." The room became completely silent. "She led an emergency rescue mission during severe weather and brought 7 Allied personnel and a downed pilot to safety." Bradley's eyes remained fixed on the document. Grandpa continued. "Emily was injured during the mission, but she refused to leave until her crew had been treated and safely evacuated. She was later recognized for her courage and leadership. He paused and looked at me with pride. She asked me to keep these awards because she never wanted to make a big deal about them. Then Grandpa turned back to Bradley. You spent the entire evening trying to make yourself look important by insulting her. Bradley lowered his head. Emily has done things you know nothing about, Grandpa said. And unlike you, she never needed to brag about them. Bradley looked at me. The arrogant lieutenant who had walked into the house earlier was gone. In his place stood someone who finally understood how wrong he had been. Mark squeezed my hand beneath the table. Grandpa's voice hardened. A real officer earns respect through competence, discipline, and humility, not by putting down others. He looked directly at Bradley. You owe Emily an apology. Right now. Bradley swallowed. Emily, I'm sorry, he said quietly. I was completely wrong. I judged you without knowing anything about your service. I had no right to disrespect you. I looked at him calmly. I wasn't interested in humiliating him. Apology accepted, I said. Just remember that every service member carries responsibilities you may know nothing about. Let your actions speak for you. Bradley nodded and sat down. For the rest of dinner he barely spoke. Grandpa picked up his fork and gave me a small, proud smile. I finally understood something that evening. The loudest person in the room isn't always the strongest. Sometimes real strength is simply staying quiet and letting your actions speak. Asterisk. What would you have done in my place?